For a while now, we've known where Israel draws its support from. But who stands in solidarity with Palestine? Well, one of the most pro-Palestinian nations in the world is not a Muslim country, nor is in the Middle East. I'm Anelise, Borges, and on this episode of The Stream, we look into why the Irish are so sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. Let's begin the show with Andy Clark, an Irish history expert who you may know as Tenistry on Instagram. Here's his take on the historical link behind the relationship between the Irish and the Palestinians.
Whenever you look at the British colonisation of Ireland and the Israeli colonisation of Palestine, it becomes very easy to see why so many Irish people stand with Palestine, because a lot of the things that Britain did in Ireland have been done by Israel in Palestine. One of those things is land confiscation. In 1641 in Ireland, around 40% of the land was owned by England or by settlers, and just about 70 years later, that number had skyrocketed to over 90%. Another strategy is the use of religion to justify atrocities or to oversimplify a conflict. In Ireland, everything is boiled down to Catholics versus Protestants. In Palestine, everything is boiled down to Muslims versus Jews. In reality, these conflicts are political, they are colonial, but the use of religion to oversimplify them and remove nuance makes it easier to trick people into falling into one camp or the other. Ronald Storrs, the first British military governor of Jerusalem, called Israel a loyal little Jewish Ulster, and this refers to another strategy, partition. Ireland was partitioned into 26 counties and then 6 counties of Ulster. Those 6 counties are still in the UK, and it was partitioned under threat of violence from Britain. It was a heavily contentious issue, and the partition of land, presented as a compromise, is another strategy used by both Britain and by Israel to try and suggest that they are open to compromise or debate, when in reality it's about coercion and control. Another key parallel is the Black and Tans. They were a paramilitary group used in Ireland to crush Irish resistance to Britain. They were condemned by everyone, by MPs, archbishops, even the King of England condemned them. Once they were done in Ireland, they left Ireland and they went over to Palestine, where the same strategies of anti-civilian violence, of burning people's property and hurting civilians, were used in Palestine, but that condemnation evaporated once they left Ireland and went over to Palestine.
Fascinating stuff. Let's bring in our guests now to help us unpack all of that. Tadhg Hickey is an Irish comedian, actor, writer and musician whose sketches on geopolitics have gone viral online. Cliodhna Bhreatnach from the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and Michaela, Rafferty, who works with the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement in Belfast. Thank you all so much for your time today. I would like to start by getting your views on this shared history of colonization and revolutionary struggle, and how you guys find yourselves part of this solidarity movement. Cliodhna, can I get you to start here?
I think in Ireland, it's the solidarity between colonised peoples in the face of empire and in the face of war. And if you go to a protest in Dublin, people are very proud to fly their tricolours alongside the Palestinian flag. You'll have posters with old Irish revolutionary slogans repurposed to support Palestine. You'll hear people chanting, "In our millions, in our billions, we're all Palestinians." And I think Irish people really do mean that in a very heartfelt way. That identification through our colonial history is, I think, an active, engaged, anti-imperialist one. It's not some kind of flat sense of victimization, but I think it's that history has been kept alive by more recent struggles. Of course, the Troubles in the North is massively important. The island is still partitioned to this day. Grieving families are trying to get justice from the British government for atrocities committed. So that's a vital link. And then you had the 1984 boycott of South African goods, which eventually led to the Irish state putting sanctions on apartheid South Africa. So these are proud legacies that have left almost an infrastructure of solidarity organisations over the last few decades.
Through organising in and mobilising. Michaela, you were affected on a personal level by this history of colonisation and resistance. Would you mind sharing that story with us and how that shaped you and still influences you today in your support for the Palestinian cause?
Sure, yeah. So I'm from Belfast in the north of Ireland, and as has been explained, we're still under British occupation through our devolved government. When I was a young person, my father was imprisoned for his political actions in the Irish resistance. It was a very isolating time as a young person for me and my younger brother and sister, having our daddy put in jail, and that kind of dominant narrative that this was our fault as a family. And I was linked in through a support system, a youth organisation. I was linked in with a young person in Palestine whose father was being illegally held in an Israeli jail, and the two of us kind of just became like pen pals and shared read letters to each other and shared our experiences with each other. So I remember that being a really a pivotal time, I guess, in sparking my own interest in what's going on in Palestine, and really feeling that close solidarity as two young people who were living these oppressive systems. And yeah, then I just continued to try to understand the Palestine struggle. I went to visit Palestine myself, and unfortunately, like through the contact that me and this girl had carried on for a few years, and then I think at some stage our letters were intercepted and we lost contact. And I do often wonder where's she and where's her family and what's going on for her. So yeah, I feel like as Irish people, we as people and citizens of the world, first and foremost, we have an obligation and a responsibility to do all that we can to free Palestine and to end these atrocities, but particularly as Irish people who know too well what colonialism actually feels like. We have a duty to stand in active solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Palestine.
But it is interesting that it still surprises many people around the world today just how much you guys stand in support with Palestine. Tadhg, a large number of our viewers today actually might know you and some of your sketches about the absurdities that we actually have been told are just part of the world's reality today. Through humor, you've been educating many people out there about some pretty serious things. Before you talk to us about it and how you embarked on this journey, here's Tadhg for those who may still not know him.
This week on Neighbours from Hell, we're with an innocent young man who claims to be under attack by not one neighbour, but several. Not to mention his own housemate.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a head scratcher because I'm such a lovable and placid guy. You know, I mean, these ruffians here, openly hostile towards me, particularly at the moment for some reason.
And can you think of anything that might have provoked that?
I mean, I killed a cherished member of their family and injured many others with explosive pagers.
You did what?
But other than that... Now, this family, psychos. Ask anyone, pure evil. They get all their cronies to attack me pretty much every day. They want to kill me.
Unprovoked, I assume.
I mean, I killed a few of them when I blew up the conservatory in there, but...
Is there any chance that you're the one doing the provoking?
Is there any chance you'd like to retract that, or I'll see to it that you lose your job?
Tadhg, can you tell us about your relationship with Palestine? How did you come to know about these struggles, and why did you decide to do these sketches?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say it was a real buzz for me to see my back garden on Al Jazeera. That was a lovely moment for me. So yeah, I think I've been educated by the fact that I would be an Irish Republican, I suppose, and my views, like since I've been in school, have been very much about Irish resistance and the colonial experience. And again, as Michaela touched on, because it's also recent in the north, I think they've been like steps ahead of us in the south. But a lovely thing that has happened, if I can say that something lovely has happened in all this horror in the last year, is that people in the south, like me and others, I suppose, have come to understand a little bit more our colonial past and our colonial identities. Like the North had no other choice but to understand it because they were still living through it. But in the South, we'd kind of walked down a kind of more consumerist post-colonial world where it's almost embarrassing to bring it up. And I think the Palestinian people have have made us look at ourselves. And I think, as Cliodhna lovely, she wonderfully touched on the idea that you're not going back to be maudlin, you're just going back to understand where you've come from, I think, so that you can be more fulsome in the present, and you can go forward with actual solidarity. So it's in many ways, it's kind of unifying Ireland, this kind of solidarity with Palestine. But yeah, I mean, I suppose I'd always been interested, and I'd been reasonably kept up on what was going on. But I suppose everything changed this year because the level of horror and the level of barbarity was just on a scale that no one had ever seen before. And then it went for me from an abstraction, where something that I was kind of interested in geopolitically, into something that was personal, because I now have so many friends from the area, and they're just checking their phones, to see if another member of their family has been murdered. So when your friends are going through that stuff, you're there, I think, as a buddy, not just as somebody who's, interested in geopolitics and maybe trying to use humor to raise awareness for it. But I think where satire comes in, to answer your question directly, is that one of the main types of propaganda that the Israeli regime uses is that it tells ordinary people like me that I will never understand it unless I had a degree in geopolitics and I'd spent like 20 years in Israel. And that's part of the methodology they have of pushing you out of the discussion. And I think satire does the exact opposite. It makes supposedly really nuanced, difficult things to understand, which are not that way at all. Like, I don't need to tell you guys, but it makes it understandable to the basic person if it's just a house share situation set bizarrely in Cork. So it's been effective to reach people. And I think if it's convinced a few people who are on the fence that actually what's going on is not in any way symmetrical, it's a straight up land grab, settler colonial genocide, then I hopefully will have done my job right.
And out of curiosity, your numbers on Instagram are fascinating, but you often talk about Patreon and how you lost a lot of contracts and paid work over this. Is that how much censorship you actually have gone through?
Yeah, it's mad, because people tell me if you get to these kind of numbers on social media, you would have a great life. Like, you'd never have to worry about anything again. But I haven't had a single offer of a paid partnership. And I used to do a lot of voiceover work. So this is, hopefully we'll get to this. This is the kind of reality of Ireland. The people in Ireland are amazing. I'm so proud of them. In my own county, we've got rallies and marches and protests in every little town in Cork. And I'm so proud of that. But the elite, the people that run this country, particularly the government, the establishment, different story altogether. So to give you one...
It's precisely that.
Sorry, go ahead.
That is precisely what we're going to talk about now. And I would like to get your guys, your take on this, because indeed, Ireland has been extremely outspoken about Israel's genocidal actions in Gaza. But there are questions over whether the Irish establishment is doing enough about this issue. And Cliodhna, Ireland has been accused of complicity even in the funding of Israeli settlements, and some of its leaders have been roundly criticized for meeting with political figures that have been contributing to the genocide, like US President Joe Biden. Why would you say the government and the establishment, again, insists on that position despite public opinion?
Well, I think very simply, it's the American relationship. There's pressure on the government in one way, direct political pressure from the United States, as in you have congressmen writing threats to the Irish government, warning them, if you enact sanctions on Israel, here's what we're going to do to you. In another sense, our government is a right-wing one, it's a neoliberal one, it's interested in profits. The Irish economy is based on foreign direct investment, which means that basically most of our jobs come from multinationals based here in Ireland. The government is scared of scaring off multinationals. Now, there is an argument to be made that multinationals don't really care about Irish foreign policy. They care about our lovely tax breaks that we give them. So I think there's another, a third kind of factor in this as well, in that I think, as Tadhg touched on, the Irish government and the Irish media, to a large extent, identify psychologically with the American liberal politician class. They don't like to see themselves as coming from a colonized nation or as, having that legacy of anti-colonial resistance. They very much identify with big imperial powers of the West, the EU, and of course NATO members, which is going to be trouble for our neutrality down the line. But yes, I think put it simply, it's Ireland's very close relationship with the United States.
With America and US dollars. I'd like to bring up Sinn Féin here, this party with historical ties with the Revolutionary Irish Republican Army, accused now of betraying the movement's revolutionary roots and failing to back up their words of support for Palestine with concrete action. Here's a segment of a speech delivered by its spokesperson, Matt Carthy.
Just as we have stood with those from every corner of the world, of every race and of every creed, who loudly and proudly declare in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians.
Michaela, we have to give it to them. It's very rare that we hear spokespeople of Western political parties speak like that about Palestine. But would you say disappointing is the word to define the lack of action here with regards to what is happening on the ground, given Ireland's history? What would your father think of that, for example?
Well, I think it's completely disappointing, but unfortunately not at all surprising. I think Sinn Féin have claimed to be a party of the people. They've got into power representing working class communities and those that are fighting British imperialism. That's how they rose to power. And now that they have gained that power, they have completely turned their backs on the communities that got them there. And we have seen that through their housing policies, through the political choices that they've made in the North time and time again. I'm a youth worker. I work with young people who have been pushed to the margins of society. And a lot of that is at the hands of Sinn Féin. And I think that whenever it's very easy for people to speak these words and say, hi, we in our thousands, in our millions, it's a very different thing to actually act that out. And I think, Sinn Féin have just shown time and time again in the choices that they've made that they don't stand with Palestine, that they stand with the capitalist machine that is going to deliver the goods and allow them to continue to create this political class that they've got so very used to. And a frightening thing for us in the North, there's very little free speech in terms of having a critical eye on political decisions that are being made and on how politicians are conducting themselves. People have lost jobs, people have lost funding, have lost it's censorship in speaking out against Sinn Féin is quite frightening, I would say, for us in the North.
Tadhg, your take here, do you agree that there is this disconnect between the people and those in power? And would you say people are aware of that? Just one example is the Occupied Territories Bill that's been kind of rolling around since, I guess, 2018. Nothing has been done. Now political parties are saying, oh, vote for us, then we'll actually enact it. Can you tell us a little bit more about this disconnect and whether people are familiar, are aware of that?
Yeah, definitely. And just to say, Sinn Féin are not in power in the South. It's important to say that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are our ruling parties in the South, and they've been in government for a long, long time. So in the South, I'd like to put the focus on those parties because they're in government right now and they're being duplicitous right now. They're, our Prime Minister, our Taoiseach, Simon Harris, he's known as the TikTok Taoiseach. He's better on social media than I am. He understands the optics of things very well and he'll say the right things. We've got a government who are excellent at saying the right things. Then we'll find, because Arab nations don't understand the intricacies of Irish politics, just like we don't understand the intricacies of the Middle East, then what happens is that he says something and it goes viral around the Middle East and he gets lots of pats on the back and photo opportunities. But in real terms, as Francesca Albanese pointed out, the most vocal countries like Ireland, what have they done? Really nothing. And I think she described it as a disgrace. So there's the Occupied Territories Bill, which is knocking around since 2018, as you say. It would ban importing goods from the occupied territories. Our deputy leader is now saying that it needs to be rewritten, even though it's passed through both houses of parliament. So there's a bit of chicanery going on because we're on the precipice of an election. We've got a thriving dual use trade with Israel in the middle of a genocide, a country that's supposed to be, as you're saying, and as we're here to discuss, that we're loyal and steadfast supporters of Palestine, and yet our government is engaging in allowing like 700% increase in trade. Our central bank is buying Israeli war bonds at the moment. And I think the most disgraceful thing is that our airspace, and particularly Shannon and Aldergrove and Belfast, are being used by US military, and that's on the increase all the time. So we as a government, we say the right things about Gaza and about Palestine, but actually I think our government is if anything, is pro-Israel. And yes, the people have cottoned on. We had a pretty epic protest at Shannon Airport recently, and we're planning another one. I think the people see through the crap at this point. And personally, I'm embarrassed. For a long time, I was kind of proud that as a nation we were being spoken about as like such supporters, but actually it's time to, let people know that our government are actually a disgrace on this matter, and they're trying to fool people, and we will no longer accept it. We as an Irish people, I think, much more than our government, will no longer be complicit in this genocide, and there's activism happening all over the country, and I'd like to think that we're going to see serious developments and force their hand and get them to actually do their job.
Cliodhna, a final word here on where to from here in terms of keeping this level of mobilization of the people. We've been talking about the differences in the north and in the south of Ireland, but how overall do you think people can keep supporting Palestine and Palestinians in the midst of all this, considering everything that is going on politically in your own country? I mean, how do you keep the momentum here?
Well, the momentum, I feel, is not flagging at all. I actually think it's really ramped up in the past few weeks. Certainly, I can see an influx of new members into my organisation after Israel's horrific attacks on North Gaza. There's always time for people to get involved and new members. And as Tadhg had mentioned, we've had massive mobilisations in Shannon Airport. So we've got two really important things to pressure the government on. One is the Occupied Territories Bill to prohibit the goods that are being manufactured in the illegal settlements in the West Bank. So that's a form of economic sanctions on Israel. We really need to push that concrete action. As we've been saying, the government doesn't deserve plaudits for its well wishes during a genocide. The International Court of Justice mandates that states have to prevent genocide. It's not saying, would you please criticize that bit of genocide? It's saying we have to materially prevent it. We have to put economic sanctions on, and we have to stop warplanes using Shannon Airport and trespassing sovereign Irish airspace. Now, the government are under such huge pressure that they're saying they're doing a U-turn. They're saying they want to pass the Occupied Territories Bill. They should postpone the election and get that done straight away. And they're responding with silence on the issue of the warplanes in our airspace. So I think Irish people need to keep on doing what they're doing. We need to get mobilised. We need to push for BDS. We need to keep on pressuring our politicians. And I think, very importantly, we have people doing this in their local areas all around the country, in the smallest rural places in Ireland, even in the offshore islands. So if the Palestine solidarity in Ireland is a very local issue, anywhere in Ireland you go, you're going to see vigils and demonstrations for Palestine. It's not just Dublin, it's not just Belfast, it's everywhere. And I think that, people really need to show up in their local areas. They need to push for BDS, and they need to push the government for economic sanctions and to stop letting our airspace be used for warplanes.
And we will continue following this story very closely, hopefully with your help. Cliodhna, Tadhg and Michaela, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being part of the stream today. And thank you all for tuning in. Do keep the conversation going online. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into your questions and suggestions. Take care, and I'll see you soon.